As you are aware, the country is in a crisis that has been orchestrated by those who are in power, a crisis that has been worsened, by the intransigence of the ruling regime. And therefore today we gather here to agree on the way forward to navigate this crisis, especially the crisis which has been exacerbated by the offending Finance Bill 2023. So today we want to listen to our leader, give us direction on the way forward. Because as a country, for sure, we need a way forward that we cannot get from the clueless, rudderless Kenya Kwanza regime. So without much ado, and welcome, Your Excellency, Honorable Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka. Welcome. So, without much ado, allow me to welcome His Excellency, Prime Minister Raila Odinga, the leader of the Azimio coalition, to make his address. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Let's be upstanding as His Excellency comes forward. Thank you.
You may be seated. Members of the Fourth Estate, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Hamjambo. Naona waandishi wa habari wanaonekana wamechelewa. Sijui kama wamepata chai au bado hawajatosheka. Now, but let me take the opportunity to welcome you to this Azimio meeting. As the leader of minority of Azimio in Parliament has already said, this is an important occasion today when we want to unveil our position as Azimio on this issue of the finance bill. I want to first take the opportunity and the privilege to introduce the Azimio Economic Council. Azimio Economic Council is led by Honorable Governor Nderitu Muridhi. There. You have Deputy Governor Caroline Karugu. We have Honorable John Mbadi, who is also chairman of ODM, and we have former PS Torome Saitoti. Torome. There are other members who are not there today, but we have a council that consists of 7 members. They have looked at this bill very extensively, and after I've made my remarks today, they are going to make a brief presentation to you to enforce what I'm going to say. Now we say that next week, the Kenya Kwanza regime will present the highlights of its inaugural budget and revenue-raising measures to the National Assembly. As usual, it seeks to amend laws relating to various taxes and duties, such as the Income Tax Act, Value-Added Tax, the VAT Act, Tax Procedures Act, and Excise Duty Act, while proposing new taxes, regulations, and incentives. Today, we lay out our final objection to the revenue-raising measures contained in the Financial Bill 2023. We also give final instructions to our members of Parliament, after which, depending on how the Ruto administration behaves, this matter may take a very different turn. Celebrated African writer Chinua Achebe said, and I quote, "A disease that has never been seen before cannot be cured with everyday herbs." In the history of budget making in Kenya, no regime has imposed so many and so high taxes on our people in return for nothing except fantasies and fairy tales. This bill is a disease that cannot be cured with everyday herbs. This bill is economic sabotage. If Ruto insists on this bill, this country will go into full recession. This bill requires and must get fierce resistance. No Senate leader withdraws subsidies on basic goods, then increases taxes on the same goods and salaries of working people, including hawkers. You withdraw subsidies, and then you now add taxes to add insult to injury. I will highlight areas of significant concern to us. Then let the Azimio Economic Council take the country through the details. Ruto wants to levy taxes on chama or merry-go-rounds. Merry-go-rounds are the bankers and lenders of last resort for our mothers and youth, particularly in rural areas and slums. Without offering any services to the chamas, women groups and trade associations, Ruto has decided they must pay taxes. This strikes at the heart of women's economy. It kills savings and spreads poverty among an already vulnerable group. At a time, the National Hospital Insurance Fund and the National Social Security Fund are failing. Ruto is telling Kenyans to forego 3% of their salaries and deposit it into some fantasy called housing levy. Nobody knows where it is housed. The government cannot agree whether it is a tax or an investment. Nobody knows how government became an investment advisor to Kenyans. They ignore concerns by employers and employees that many pay that many pay slips are already overwhelmed by deductions, loans, and lack of pay rise. They ignore concerns that this tax will increase business operating costs and force farms to relocate. Already some farms are relocating merely because of the high cost of energy in this country. It is cheaper to manufacture in Egypt and export back to Kenya. Look at the arrogance with which they want to raise turnover tax for businesses from the current 1% to 3%. They are targeting small businesses by reducing turnover of taxable businesses from Kenya shillings 1 million to 500,000. With this, any small business that sells goods and services worth 1,370 daily will pay a turnover tax of 15,000 per year, regardless of whether the business makes a profit or not. That sounds like a memo on how to kill businesses and the economy. Nobody now knows where the bottom-up economy went. The mama mboga, the boda boda, the juakali, the hustlers. Contrast that decision to increase taxes for small businesses and merry-go-rounds with Ruto'S plan to scrap VAT on aircrafts and helicopters. A benefit that should be extended to small businesses is being extended to the rich who trade aircrafts. This is not bottom-up, this is top-bottom. Ruto promised to respect every job and its contribution to the economy. This does not look like respect for every job. The bill exposes a clear disconnect between Ruto's fantasy and the experiences of ordinary people. Hard-working people, like youth seeking to make a living as content creators and social media influencers for fun, fame, and money, are being slapped with a punitive 15% withholding tax. Ruto wants to impose a 316% tax hike on beauty products such as wigs, false beards, eyelashes, human hair, and artificial nails, among others. The beauty industry is a major employer, particularly of our women and girls who have been unable to find work elsewhere. Millions of young men and women eke a living out of saloons, spas, and barbershops. Those businesses face closure. Others will have to sack employees. Ruto and Kenya Kwanza are behaving as if cost of living is no longer a crisis in this country. Despite existing high prices, Ruto wants to impose 16% VAT on maize flour, cassava flour, and wheat flour. It gets worse when we factor in the proposal to expose agricultural pest control products, transportation of sugarcane, raw materials for fertilizer manufacturing, and fertilizers to VAT. The net effect is that costs rise again. From his fantasy world, Ruto wants to double the VAT on fuel from 8% to 16%. Pump prices will increase by 9 shillings per litre of diesel and 10 shillings per litre of petrol. The cost of goods, bus fare, and production will immediately rise again. Healthcare has impoverished millions of Kenyans. But Ruto wants to expose pharmaceuticals and medicaments to taxation by removing them from the zero-rated to tax-exempt list, targeted at the price of lifelong medication like insulin and those for chronic illnesses like diabetes and hypertension. After raising the cost of fuel, they want to raise advance tax on motor vehicles. Advance tax on passenger vehicles will increase from the current Kenya shillings 2,400 to at least Kenya shillings 5,000, and from 3,000 to at least 5,000 for commercial vehicles. Trucks will now pay at least 60,000 shillings annually, up from 20,000 shillings. Obviously, the cost will be passed to the consumer, making matatu and taxi transportation more unaffordable. And who unto you, if that vehicle ends up in an accident, Ruto wants to treat insurance compensation as income and introduce a 16% VAT on it. Insurance compensation will no longer be seen as compensation for what was lost. My car had an accident. The insurance company sends an assessor, assesses the extent of damage, which most of the times is under assessment. I'm paid compensation to go and repair my car. I have to pay a tax on that compensation. This I don't know what kind of arithmetic it is. It is the same story with per diems, mileage and travel allowance of public officers. Per diem will now be treated as an income and attract a 30% income tax. I used to be a civil servant, and per diems are based on the costs of living in the country you are traveling to. That's why it differed from Tokyo, Oslo, New York, Accra, Cairo, and so on. And whatever you did not use, you are required to retire on return. Now it is an income that you must pay 30% on. You could go on, and it will be tax after tax. Looking at the proposals, one cannot help asking, what planet does Ruto live on? Does he understand what Kenyans are going through? Let me turn briefly to the question of how did we find ourselves here? The official lie is that Kenya Kwanza inherited a broke country. The truth is, the cash crunch has been caused by economic mismanagement, wasteful spending, corruption, and the hiring of incompetent personnel. This worsening economic situation has been manufactured in State House and the office of the President in the last 8 or so months. Tax. I used to be a civil servant, and per diems are based on the costs of living in the country you are traveling to. That's why it differed from Tokyo, Oslo, New York, Accra, Cairo, and so on. And whatever you did not use, you are required to retire on return. Now it is an income that you must pay 30% on. You could go on, and it will be tax after tax. Looking at the proposals, one cannot help asking, what planet does Ruto live on? Does he understand what Kenyans are going through? Let me turn briefly to the question of how did we find ourselves here? The official lie is that Kenya Kwanza inherited a broke country. The truth is, the cash crunch has been caused by economic mismanagement, wasteful spending, corruption, and the hiring of incompetent personnel. This worsening economic situation has been manufactured in State House and the office of the President in the last 8 or so months. Government's own data indicates that contrary to what Ruto promised and what he is saying, borrowing has gone up instead of coming down. But strangely, the cash crunch continues. In September 2022, when Uhuru Kenyatta officially handed over to Ruto, Kenya's total debt was 8.701 trillion. I repeat, 8.701 trillion. Of this, 4.33 trillion was external debt, while 4.366 was domestic debt. As at March 2023, to 4.539 in March 2023. We can go further back to the year 2021. Between September 2021 to March 2022, that a comparable period, our debt rose by 405 billion, from 7.96 trillion to 8.401 trillion. External debt was at 4.209 trillion, while domestic debt stood at 4.192 trillion. This was the time Kenya was struggling with the impacts of COVID-19, including implementation of subsidies and the emerging war in Ukraine. But our total debt was still lower than what Ruto has incurred in 6 months' time. Kenya Kwanza has borrowed more than any other regime. They have removed subsidies, raised taxes, but the cash crunch has continued. They cannot pay salaries. They cannot disburse money to schools. They cannot disburse money to counties. They cannot disburse money to the elderly. They cannot finance the National Hospital Insurance Fund. And nearly all major infrastructure projects have stalled. Where is the money going? It is being stolen and being spent on wrong priorities to massage Ruto's ego. And that is not all. Quietly, Ruto is trying to change the country's debt ceiling from the current absolute number of Kenya shilling 10 trillion to a moving number of 55% of GDP. And right now they are trying to bring an amendment in Parliament that will remove the parliamentary authority to sanction increase of debt. The debt level is already 60% of the GDP. To beat that violation of the law, Ruto wants to force an amendment to the Public Finance Act to allow the National Treasury and not Parliament to set new debt ceiling. Which is why we are calling on Kenyans to reject excess taxation to finance wasteful expenditure. It is urgent that we bring Ruto back to earth because he lives on another planet. As this bill heads to the National Assembly, We must remind Ruto that excessive taxation is stifling growth. We must tell Ruto that when people have to park cars at home because of cost of fuel, it is bad for the economy. We must tell him that when Kenyans postpone traveling up country because they can't afford fuel or fare, it is bad for the economy. We must tell him that when people choose to stay indoors because they want to spend less on expensive goods, it is bad for the economy. And we must tell him that these things are happening now here in this country. Rather than burden Kenyans, we want Ruto to undertake the following. 1. Stop duplication of county roles and responsibilities. In the proposed bill, budget for health is growing by 35 billion shillings at the national level, yet health is a devolved function. 2. Adopt a zero-based budgeting. Don't take the previous budget as the baseline. Every budget must start at ground zero, where everything has to be justified. 3. Don't grow the size of the budget. Cut it down and live within your means. 4. Instead of imposing new taxes, see the loopholes that lead to the loss of revenue. 5. Stop non-essential government expenditures, including the appointment of the chief administrative secretaries. 6. Reduce the size of government. 7. Cut non-essential domestic and international travel. 8. Freeze ministerial out-of-station allowances, ministerial house allowances, and domestic allowances for cabinet and principal secretaries. 9. Stop corruption and theft of public funds. 10. Finally, we ask Ruto to humble himself, withdraw this bill, offer apology, and seek forgiveness from Kenyans for the anxiety caused then, and begin afresh. The one point I wanted to mention, that the budget for the parliament is 41 billion shillings. That of the judiciary is 23 billion shillings. But the budget for housing, which is talking about as his flagship project, is 29 billion. Parliament, with only 400 or so many members, it allocated 43 billion shillings for members to be globe-trotting around. Yet housing, which is saying is fundamental to his budget, is only allocating 29 billion shillings, less than what is given to members of parliament, almost equal to what is given to the judiciary. Is economics upside down. You have noted that the regime has run out of sound bites and explanations for these proposals and has resorted to threats. But we have agreed with our MPs on what to do. Vote against any tax rises. Should Ruto overrun the National Assembly, we will regroup and overrun him in the wider National Assembly of the whole people of Kenya. End of statement. So we welcome Madam Martha Karua, who just joined. I would now like to invite the chair of the Mio Council, Honorable Nderitu Murithi, to take over from here. Welcome.
Yep. Thank you, Your Excellency. Your Excellency Raila Odinga, Your Excellency Mother Karua, party leaders. That's what we'll answer. Then afterwards, the principals will make interventions, and you can then ask the bigger picture questions. Yes, down the road.
Yeah, Chairman, we are not going to take just from members of the press alone, even other participants. If you have a question, just raise your hand and you'll be able to ask. Any question?
Of a technical nature. As we do so, Saitoti Torome, please come up to make one statement around the impact.
Questions? Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed. It would appear we did a fine job in explaining the intricacies. So thank you very much indeed for that. Saitoti Torome, in one sentence, what's going to be the impact of this taxation on the Kenyan economy overall?
I think thank you very much, Governor Muriithi. Mine is only to state one point. Since this debate of the finance bill started, there has been a lot of emphasis on the cost of living. One thing that I like to point out is actually the fact that VAT, it is the one that has a direct impact on the cost of living. Why? Because it is an expenditure tax. And because it's an expenditure tax, it makes the final product like petroleum to be expensive, which affects the cost of living. And also, when we put VAT on inputs, it makes the cost of production very high. Deputy Governor Karo has just said about how it will affect our economy. And it is actually true, because God are the days, and you will agree with me, when you used to say that Kenya is a blue-eyed boy where all the foreign investors are attracted in Africa. It is no longer the case. Many African countries have opened up their economy. Tanzania is there, it has got a lot of resources. Rwanda, Uganda, even DRC now is a member of the East African community, and South Sudan. So when we make the cost of production in our country very expensive, we will not be able to attract foreign investors, and our economy will not grow. And even to mention that, I can see Honorable Oparanya is there. He actually used to be the Minister for Planning and Vision 2030. If we make the cost of production in our country very high by imposing such kind of taxes that are in this finance bill, we will not be able to realize the dream of Vision 2030, because we will not be competitive. So we have to be very careful. And just as the Right Honorable Prime Minister said when he was making his closing remarks, when a government is confronted with a budgetary deficit, because this bill is actually trying to make sure that we don't have a deficit, there are two ways. You either increase revenue, you borrow from the public through central bank, or you can even lower the budget. So instead of focusing so much on raising taxes or revenue through taxes, why don't we focus even on the way we do budgeting? And I think that one has been explained by Derito Muriithi on how we can actually be able even to remove duplication and many other things, and then we address the issue of governance. I think I am always a person of very few words, and I think that is what I have actually observed. But the most important thing, this bill will make it difficult for us to realize the dream of Vision 2030. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. May I turn it back to Majority Leader to help us with the balance of the presentation. Asante sana.
Can we give a final round of applause to our Economic Council for a wonderful job? They'll be leaving now to join some other crucial meeting happening next door. So we shall be excusing the members of the Economic Council. Yes. But in the meantime, please allow me to invite Her Excellency Martha Karua to come and forward and address us. Karibu sana, Mheshimiwa Martha Karua.
Good morning, everyone. After my boss has spoken, has given such an eloquent address, there is very little for me to say, and also with the remarks that have been made by our team. But I want to say that clearly the finance bill is an indication that the Kenya Kwanza government has waged an economic war against citizens, and especially the vulnerable. You would expect that during these hard times, there would be measures to cushion the vulnerable. You would expect that food items, critical items, you remember that Azimio has been on the forefront of asking for the lowering of cost of living, actually demanding for the lowering of cost of living. This bill is a contempt card on those demands because its net effect will be to push the cost of living upwards, as has been very eloquently explained. Once you raise VAT on fuel, there's a ripple effect on virtually everything. When you tax exempt things that were zero rated, once again, the effect is pushing the prices up of essential items such as medicine, critical medicine. That, with the current status of NHIF, it means the average person will not have access to critical medicine. And in Kenya, we say families are just one sickness away from abject poverty. So when you move critical medicines to exempt, tax exempt, and push their prices up, it means this bill is going to directly cause deaths, suffering and death to many Kenyans. It also means that food will be less accessible. Already, we have a crisis of people not being able to have meals on their table. With the joblessness, with the cost of living being up, Kenyans have been shown by the Kenya Kwanza regime that they are on their own. This is happening in a context where the expenditure, non-essential expenditure, for the office of the president, for the office of the deputy president, for the prime cabinet secretary, luxury items, they have pushed the budget up for travel, the example being led by the office of the president. They have pushed the amount for purchase of non-essential items, fuel, gasolines. Cars are not an essential, especially if they're just discarding cars they found that have not lived have not done their time. Just because you have come in, you buy new vehicles at a time our economy is in crisis. They talk of austerity measures on one hand. On the other hand, they are lavishly spending like there is no tomorrow. So just a look at what is happening. If you look at the finance bill as against the budget proposals, because the increase in expenditure is well captured in the budget proposals, it is quite clear that Kenyans are on their own and that this is a cruel and caring regime which does not care at all if Kenyans die of hunger, if children fail to go to school, or if people die because they cannot access medical services. I would urge, especially our Azimio members of parliament, as you debate, let us not be hoodwinked to concentrate only on the issue of the housing fund. This bill has so much poison in it, which needs to be unpackaged to Kenyans, item by item. And here there can be division of labor, because no single person will have enough time, whether in the media or in parliament, to analyze all the sections of the bill, so that we unpackage this as easily as we can to Kenyans, so that the mamamboga knows and the artisan that their targets of punitive taxes, I'm using the word punitive, when you start charging turnover tax to people whose income is less than 2,000 shillings a day, because they are aiming at people who are earning 1,300 for taxation. That's a person selling mandazi or chapatis on the roadside. These are very, very punitive measures, and this is something that should be resisted. And if the Kenya Kwanza government goes through with it like they have threatened, Kenyans must get ready to take action, remembering sovereignty is in their hands. And without much ado, I'll call upon my brother, His Excellency, Dr. Kalonzo Musyoka, even to offer greetings. Much has been said. You are not being asked for much, just greetings.
Asante. You done it so well. I didn't want to add anything, because our brother Raila put it so well, so eloquently. I think this has been actually a learning experience for a lot of us, and I want to thank our Economic Council team. Now Kenyans know the difference between zero rating and exemption, and that is where the big lie is. And I think that has been unpacked, thanks to Honorable Badi and the colleagues. Last Sunday I was in a church somewhere in the river, in Mulolongo, and I spoke about the skepticism at my level with people wanting to rush to court. Everybody is within their rights to rush to court, but we have also heard from our sister Caroline Karugu on the provisions of Article 48. My brother, who is also a very good friend, Wajakoya, will probably agree, and Mother, denying people access to justice as unconstitutional. So some people rushed and said Kalonzo is supporting the finance bill. My media team did a very good job of that disinformation. So you can see the level of panic. People are panicked because they are doing the wrong things. So, as I said, we are ready to go. Our teams are very well. A leader in Parliament is here, a leader in the National Assembly, and the leaders, of course, the matter is not going to the Senate, so it's all National Assembly. So, Wandai and the teams, I'm sure you are equal to the task. You want me to call some other friend? Yeah, I'll probably call my brother, Governor Iria, who has lived through this. But before you come, Iria, it appears to me, over and above all this, taxation, there's also the Kanjus. You know, the county governments are also doing their own taxation. So look at it. That's why I said you cannot develop an economy this way. And those who have been following even the debate on debt ceiling, for me, I find that completely unacceptable. The issue about debt ceiling had to get President Joe Biden leave the G20 or the G7 summit in Hiroshima, in Tokyo, to go back and make peace and argue and agree with the House Speaker of Congress because America was at the verge of breaching, breaching even the debt ceiling thing. So this debt ceiling matter cannot be hidden. It must be brought to the fore so that Kenyans will know you cannot extend the debt ceiling without the full involvement discussion of Parliament. So hiding it under some funny clause that we just been told, I don't know who made that presentation, that the cabinet secretary responsible for finance can just go and lay on the table some information, and then the country then assumes that all is well. So I think in a nutshell, we are in a crisis, and we need to be able to accept that this is a crisis matter. And then, as my brother said, the conclusion was very clear. We give it to the public court. I don't know whether it's you, Kioni or Wanjokoya or Mwangi you had stood. As I said, I had nothing useful to add. That's why I was muttering around. But I hope I've managed to clear some issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think from a broader sense, we need to look at this budget vis-a-vis the commitments which Kenya Kwanza gave to Kenyans, because that's why they were voted into office. Because even as we get into the figures, there are some broad commitments which Kenya Kwanza gave, and they are supposed to be delivered through the finance bill, essentially. To Central Kenya, for example, there was a commitment for guaranteed minimum prices for coffee, for tea, for milk, and for other farm produce. And from an income perspective, because like for example, from our region, our income comes from agriculture. This finance bill must answer the question, then after implementing this finance bill, what then will be the guaranteed minimum price of tea? Because it was a commitment. What will be the guaranteed minimum price of coffee? What will be the guaranteed minimum of price of milk, of cotton, of pyrethrum, and of other farm produce? Because that was the main commitment to farmers. So is coffee going to go to 200 as they committed as an output of this finance bill? That is what those people expect, because they might not understand the numbers very clearly and the argument today, but the impact of this to them is what they need to take home. So Kenya Kwanza must tell us, out of this finance bill, then what will be the guaranteed price of coffee to Mount Kenya farmers, of tea, of milk, of rice, because that was their commitment. As we speak, tea attracts about 42 levies, 42 taxes. And when I was a governor, together with the governor of Kericho, we had actually gone to court, and the matter is still in court, trying to challenge the 42 levies against tea as a crop or as a sector. The matter is still in court. So those are the matters which this bill is supposed to be resolving for our farmers. But they're just giving us figures which are actually indicative of the fact that fertilizer is going to go up, the cost of transport is going to go up, packaging costs is going to go up. So when are we going then? How are we then going to get those deliverables? That is very important. They must tell, especially because I'm from Central and I'm not biased, and I'm speaking also for others, then what will be the price of the guaranteed minimum price of coffee to farmers, tea, milk, cotton? That was a commitment. So they can do what they want, but then announce those prices as part of the finance bill. Lastly, this is not the only finance bill. We are going to have other 47 finance bills from every county. And because the model is the same, and the principle is the same, and the alignment is Kenya Kwanza, and this is a philosophy, it means we now expect worse bills from the counties. So how are we going then to marry the county finance bills and this finance bill and then say this is the overall burden to our people? Because this is half of the burden, or partial burden. So someone need to tell us then what will be the overall impact, because this is half the journey. There is another one which is going to come from the devolved system. What will then will be the overall impact to the average Kenyan of this bill? Because the other levies which are being discussed, and they have been encouraged, by the way, to make sure that they raise as much money as possible, because there is no money from Treasury. So as we look at it, we need to then ask what will be the overall impact, and we also need to assess, and our team need to get into the county finance bills so that we know the overall impact of this year's finance budget from both national and county governments. Thank you.
I think, to me, this is a Shakahora budget. We are all candidates for Shakahora. At this late, none of us can be able to add a kilo to our weights, because the cost of living is certainly going to be totally beyond the reach of all Kenyans. And I wanted to say, when we talked about the 4-5 issues as Azimio, the cost of living, this bill deals with the cost of living. So when we were saying that before any talks take place, we needed to address the cost of living, you can see where the vision that our leader had. When you talk about the need to protect multi-party democracy, to ensure that parties within Azimio are not swallowed or collapsed, is because if they are collapsed, then there will not be this voice on behalf of Kenyans. The voice of the voiceless will have been taken away, and they are still at it. And I think it is important that they are told they will not succeed, because in succeeding, they will have killed the voice that speaks on behalf of Kenyans. You now can see them clearly trying to legalize corruption. When you say that you'll be taking to Parliament the minister to go and justify why he breached the law, and you provide that in an act of Parliament, it's a regime that is not keen on fighting corruption at all, at all, at all. In the whole of the presentations that we have had, I didn't hear any attempt to seal the loopholes. And if we sealed the loopholes, I'm sure there will be a lot of money that can come back and be available to Kenyans for the things that they have been complaining about. Our party leader, Azimio party leader, has again read us in talking about the need to look at the IBC. The whole process of arriving at leaders. The leaders we have in Parliament and those who went through the window into State House and other places are now producing this. So if our process of electing people is not checked, it will continue producing people who do not care about the welfare of Kenyans. And that is clear from the kind of bill that has been led to us and the one we have been going through. We've been talked about Vision 2030. Now, and let me also say, when you have in Parliament, Mheshimiwa Wadai, unfortunately, when you have in Parliament 90% or 80% of fellas there, and especially from some regions, were all leagued in, they have no business leading these bills. They will just continue leaguing your lives out of anything useful. And that's what they are doing. Vision 2030, a country, a people without vision. That's what the Bible says. People perish if we move away from this vision. And they have not mentioned the issue of Vision 2030 or even 2063 anywhere. So we are just people galloping in the dark. Haki ya Mungu, tuko kwa shida hapa. And again, as His Excellency has said, the universal health care through the window just evaporated. A short while ago, you'd use your people back in the countryside who are happy with NHIF cards. Today, you produce it and you are chased out of the hospital. My brother is a doctor and he was told, don't retain anybody in hospital, even after any, whatever kind of operation, beyond 4 days. If you retain them beyond 4 days, wewe mwenyewe utalipa. So it's a question of whether you want to undertake these operations is crazy. But there is one more thing that I think we need to focus on. And this is what I would help us and the Senate. Our Kinara has said it many times, but maybe it has not been, the media has not picked it. The amount of money that is spent by Parliament moving from one country to the other, it's a lot of money. The speakers, for example, and especially in the Senate, they actually exchange suitcases at the airport. He has so many places to go, he has no time, to cover all the trips that have been earmarked for him in a year. If we cannot focus on this also, I think it's something, 41 billion shillings to Parliament compared to the judiciary at 20-something, 22, or something like that, and the housing at 29. There are areas where these characters can focus on and still achieve some of the things they think need to be achieved. Of course, not housing, without taxing the Kenyans. Taxing the merry-go-round, Mama Boga na wale mem. I don't know whether you understand. Mount Kenya is full of those merry-go-rounds. And merry-go-round, chamas, all those, table banking. So you introduce table banking so that you can get a mrija kukunywa maziwa ya kina mama jikoni. So this is really taxing people while they are sitting at the fireplace. It's really not something that you need to sit loud and wait. But Baba, as I was coming from Nyandarua the other day, I bought some fruits. And a lady who was selling fruits to me said, "Wewe nimekuona kwa Azimio. This pineapple, I am buying it for you, for Baba. Take it to Baba and tell Baba, you are our only hope. Ukirudi nyuma, wa Kenya watapata shida." Kwa hivyo, Kenyans are looking at what you are doing and the leadership that you are giving to us. Na jana usiku nikawaambiwa, wanagojea tu kuambiwa twende. Pali utasema watu waende, hapo ndio watu wataenda. Wame give up kwa hii watu ambao wako hapa. Asante sana. Thank you so much.
Before I invite the last two speakers, let me introduce some of us who are in the room. We have the Honorable Peter Orero, who is our host MP, the MP for Kibra. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Orero. We have Mr. Yagwik Ramji, the Deputy Party Leader of Roots Party. Makofi kwake. We have Ambassador Elkana Odembo. I'm sure you all know him. Karibu sana Balozi. We have Sheikh Juma Ngao and his colleague. Very good, Mashe. Thank you very much. Of course, we have in the house our technical team. They have been joined now by Professor Adam Solo, Durongwen, and the rest of the team. Let me invite Honorable Wajakwe to make yes. I'll be inviting, of course, Honorable Paranya to come in later. He's the chairman of the Azimio National Executive Committee. Thank you.
Baba Raila Odinga, Mheshimiwa Kalonzo Musyoka, Mheshimiwa Martha Karua, Mheshimiwa Governor wa Iria, Mheshimiwa Kioni, Mheshimiwa Paranya. I'll be very brief and I will not go to what has been said. I talk differently. When you go to a place, you don't repeat what others have said because they have made a point. Baba has made a point, the rest have made a point. I've looked into this budget. This budget is rotten. I'm not going to comment on it because it doesn't have things that matter. In Kenya today, with Gulalu Galana, which was 1 million acres of land, we had proposed as Roots Party before, we had proposed that we shall take 200,000 acres of land in Galana Gulalu and grow wheat for export. We'll not be having this issue of manuring, this issue of propositions of taxes up and taxes down. Bang does not need fertilizer. Bang does not need to be nurtured. It only grows for 4 months. But the reason why I'm talking of bank economics is The world has moved away from this miniature kind of budgetary system which are imposed by the World Bank, IMF, or Bretton Woods institutions. I, as a scholar of Bretton Woods institutions, that's law and economics, law and development, if you look at what Walter Rodney wrote, and I'm sure my friend Honorable Kalonzo is very much aware because he's a reader, Walter Rodney wrote of a phraseology that led to his death when he was a Guyanese living in Dar es Salaam at that particular time, of how Europe underdeveloped Africa. So we are talking of hegemony of development and undermining underdevelopment, because they are looking at us and saying that Africans have no conscience. We have to develop them. If you look at Professor Yunus of Bangladesh, who is also a scholar renowned for women banking, cooperative women banking, a theme that has been taken over by Bangladesh, which is mixed with Islamic banking, that the World Bank has now borrowed that kind of paradigm, where banking is done from the locality of the women where they are found. And that's a story for another day. We will not be talking on this everyday budget, every day sijui nani amefanya nini. Kama tungepanda bangi for export and for economic development, not for smoking, we will not be having this kind of discussions every day. I speak very harshly because I am one of you. And I am one of you. I am also recognized wherever I've been in terms of intellectual scholarly work that we have contributed to Harvard, London School of Economics, whereby the whites use us to develop some conscience. Now look at these theories that we are talking about here. These are the kingdom theories. There are theories that are violating what we call kingdom theories, where they talk of the garbage can and the policies. Now here, what Ruto has done is that he has brought a policy to look for a solution. No, he has brought a solution to look for a policy. Instead of putting solutions together, and then you look for a policy, our system is upside down. And none of our leaders are thinking of this. Go outside the box. Look at those Kenyans in the diaspora. Ask them why they're working there. And Honorable Odemo is here. He was one of the best ambassadors we had when we were in the UK. He used to accommodate what we had. Let's look at what we can borrow from the diaspora. We have the brains outside this country that can come and develop this country. Let's look at the Museveni format, the formula that Museveni has used. None of us wants to talk about the Kenyans in the diaspora. We talk about ourselves. Somebody went to Kangundo High School, Nairobi University, worked in the ministry, went to live in Lavington. What kind of policy do you think this person can make? Thank you very much.
Makofi kwa Mheshimiwa Wajakoya. Allow me now to invite the Honorable Wycliffe Oparanya, who is the chairman of the Azimio National Executive Council, and also the deputy party leader of ODM, to come and make closing remarks, really. And if there will be any questions, general questions, we'll ask the party leader to perhaps feed them. Thank you. Karim.
Thank you very much, Honorable Wandai. I want to apologize that I came in late. I was late, so I decided to sit at the back because I was late, and it was because of other commitments that I had earlier that I could not skip. So I want to apologize. Now, Wajakoya said that my brother, that we planned bangi for export. I don't know how we will protect people from picking it for smoking, what mechanism we shall have when we plant it so that it is not for smoking. But let me tell you that one of the principles of taxation is simplicity. Simplicity is a key principle of taxation. And simplicity in two ways. One, how you calculate it. It should be understood by the taxpayer that this is how tax will be calculated, and he can even calculate himself or herself and pay voluntarily, because it's very simple. And the second one is how you collect it. Because you have to look at the cost of collection versus the tax itself. Because if the collection is very expensive, more than even the tax itself, then that's not a good tax. So if you look at this taxation, they are lowering the threshold for turnover tax. It means there will be so many people in that net. Even Mama Mboga will be in that net. Then how are you going to collect that tax? Will you go around harassing Mama Mboga, collecting it? So that is going to be an issue. But ladies and gentlemen, remember, you are talking about Ruto, and I have said here even before, these are not Ruto's proposal. You know very well who put Ruto in power. These are the people who are telling him that if we have to keep you in power, to continue in power, this is what you should do. And we shall continue supporting you so long as you do what we tell you. That's all. I don't think even Ruto has read this taxation bill. I don't think. It is just being imposed on him. And as you go through it, remember that. Now, the finance, our economic committee was here. There is an issue that I picked up in the finance bill, that they are making a proposal to zero rate VAT on acquisition of going concern. Companies that already exist, that if you come and acquire that company, you will not pay VAT. Who are these people? You know, you acquire a company when you are rich. So if you are a rich man, you are coming to acquire Kenya pipeline. Why should I exempt you from VAT? Zero rate VAT that you are going to pay. It means, and you remember, it means already these people are now targeting these companies to acquire them cheaply. Because how do you attract even investors to come and acquire already the existing company? You attract investors to come and invest in new ventures and not going concern. Because going concern, they are already there. So, not that. And I think that should also be picked up. Now, I have a friend of mine who is in Uganda. He's a Ugandan, but he has stayed here in Kenya for a long time. So he sent me a message this morning, and I want to read to you. He's saying, let him pass the finance bill as it is. What is wrong with you people? You have to let him make mistakes. That should be your strategy. If you help him to make good decisions, how will you remove him? You are supposed to make a little noise for record purposes that you oppose it, but don't make it too strong. He will correct the mistake then. What becomes of your talking point? And this is my last shot. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, allow me, before I invite Sheikh Juma Ngao to make the final prayer, to say this, because the media have been asking if at all we are going to come up with any amendments. The answer is that a lot has been said about this finance bill, and the public has overwhelmingly rejected it. And in our view, this bill is flawed beyond redemption. So we are going to reject it in total. We are not going to propose any amendment to it. As Azimio, we have said time and again that there is still time to withdraw this bill and bring it back in a form that is responsive to the plight of the people in a form that is acceptable. But our plea has fallen on deaf ears so far. So if this bill finds its way to the floor of the House in its current form, we are not going to make any attempt to propose any amendments to it. We shall be moving to reject it in total. And in any case, there has been the argument that if the bill is rejected, what will happen? Nothing will happen. Life will continue. Because as we speak, there is a Finance Act 2022, which is in place. You reject this one, it will continue to work. And therefore, the notion that the matter of this Finance Bill 2023 is a matter of life and death is not true. It is simply a mere bill, which we have said is flawed, is not acceptable, is overburdening Kenyans who are already on their knees, and therefore the only logical thing to do is to withdraw it. And therefore, with those few remarks, let me invite the Sheikh Juma Ngao. Yes, as he comes, I've got an apology, of course, from the Honorable Wamalwa, Honorable Eugene Wamalwa, the leader of the DAP Kenya, who was elsewhere, though he's on his way, but he may come late. Thank you. Karibu Sheikh Juma Ngao.